Our next speaker is Ian Merkel, the mine geologist at the Eagle's Nest Mine in Forest Hill, California. Very famous specimen locality. We haven't heard anything from that locality in a long time, but we're about to hear some exciting news, or at least a little teaser, so I'm looking forward to this. Ian has worked at the Paraíba tourmaline mine in Mozambique. He's also worked as a mine geologist. Imagine this, at Padaneira in Minas Gerais, Brazil. He works with Danny Trinchillo currently. He's also been an exploration geologist at the Henderson molybdenum mine in Colorado and the Morenci copper mine in Arizona. Ian has a master's degree in geology from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and he has a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York in geology. He is also a partner or involved in a number of famous mineral collecting localities like Hallelujah Junction, Bruce Ridge, Washington, and one that's close to my own heart, Jackson's Crossroads, Amethyst locality, and the California Blue Mine. So without any further delay, here's our speaker, Ian Merkel, to tell us some news about the Eagle's Nest Mine in California.
Thank you, Julian. Before I start, I just want to do a few thank yous and thank Daniel. He's entrusted me for many years now to work on his projects, and it's been a great privilege and an honor. I'd also like to thank my my wonderful wife, Emily. She has been so insightful in so many things, even with respect to this presentation. So I'm very grateful for that. And Julian and all of you, and John Lindell for bringing me together with Julian. John's been my friend for almost 2 decades now. So I'm going to bring us and keep us back on Earth. Terry talked about the Motherlode a little bit, and so I'm going to go into the Eagle's Nest, which is has something to do with the Motherlode. I kind of want to give you guys an idea of what it's like to be at the Eagle's Nest mine. So I'm going to show you the history of the Motherlode belt, which the Eagle's Nest is associated with. And the Numalones Fault, more specifically, show you what the rocks are like at the mine, give you a quick history of how the Eagle's Nest came to be and the iterations it went through until it finally got to where it is today, working with Daniel Trinchillo and Eagle's Nest Mining. And then we're going to really take a deep dive into the mine and show you what it's like to pull gold out of the mine and how we get to it. And then I've got a couple of recent discoveries to kind of get you excited, I hope. This is the main portal to the mine itself that was built by the previous owners, the Sikoras. That is our main access in and out of the mine. This is the dump road. It's a pretty steep road. The haul truck is really slow going up there. We recently recovered it with mine rock for better traction. And we currently have one active dump at the mine. We call it Dump 5. Because of our location along that canyon, we can't just dump into the dump. So we have to dump into a intermediate area and then use a little excavator and hand stack all the muck out on the dump. We've been planting flowers and things in the dump as we fill it, reclaiming it from the bottom up, and it's already actually beautiful down at the bottom of the dump, which the Forest Service very much appreciates. So California's Motherlode Gold Belt. The Gold Belt is, something of lore initially. There's reports of this continuous quartz vein across the state of California. Well, back in the late 1800s, Lindgren determined and published that this is not actually true. It is a series of veins along a structure. Now, back then, they didn't know anything about plate tectonics. That structure is called the Numalones Fault. In 1925, a really seminal paper came out called the Motherlode of California. Interestingly, it defines the Motherlode as extending from Mariposa in the south up to Georgetown in the north. Now, Georgetown sits directly across the canyon from us. We can sit on the portal and look over at Georgetown. So why they decided to stop the Motherlode at that point, I don't really know. The structure continues all the way north past the Allegheny District. And you can see on this Google Earth image of the complicated geology of California that there are a whole slew of famous mines running up and down this fault zone. The California Quartz Mine is down here to the far south, very famous crystallized gold locality. The Red Ledge is north of us along the fault, all the way up into Allegheny District, which has produced insane amounts of gold. Not crystallized per se, but insane amounts of gold. The whole entire structure is about 320 kilometers long. All the gold is found more or less within an envelope plus or minus 1.5 kilometers outside of the fault zone. Fault zone is 1.5 to about 6 kilometers wide. And it's typically two main branches that hang along the footwall that define the New Melones Fault. So how did the New Melones Fault develop? Well, there was an island arc out to the west during the Jurassic that was being subducted under while the oceanic plate was simultaneously subducting underneath Proto-North America. That island arc eventually collided with Proto-North America. The island arc they call now the Smartville complex, the Smartville block. And it's that suture zone of where that island arc collided and accreted to North America that is what is called the New Melones now. When that island arc accreted and collided with North America, the subduction transferred out to the west to the San Franciscan zone. And that subduction is what created the Sierra Nevada mountains. All that subduction created the batholithic system that fueled the Sierra Nevada uplift. The New Melones was a big weak zone. So as these fluids were circulating, these hydrothermal quartz-rich fluids were circulating, they exploited the New Melones, which was a 320 kilometer long zone, and deposited all the gold along it. They've dated a whole number of those deposits using argon, and there's quite a large range. So although the gold itself in those events of deposition grew quick, as Terry pointed out, the actual mineralizing event they've dated for a total of 20 million years as that plate was subducting under. So if we zoom into the mine area, this is a close-up view of the Google Earth image, and you can see the two strands of the fault. Locally they call them the Forest Hill thrust and the Volcano Canyon thrust, but those are New Melones. Those fault zones host what is the Eagle's Nest deposit, which is an orogenic gold deposit associated with the mountain building events of the Sierra Nevadas. It's mesozonal, which means it's not too deep, it's not too shallow, it's in the middle. These deposits are known to be huge and extend for kilometers at depth. We don't know currently the depth of Eagle's Nest, how far down it goes. It's emplaced in green schistous metamorphic rocks. Terry showed an image of these type of rocks along the New Melones, and they are metamorphosed Proto-North American basinal continental ledge rocks. So they're mudstones, siltstones, and turbidite deposits that have been metamorphosed, deformed, folded, fractured, to form some more, metamorphosed some more. They've been through quite a history. This is the cross section. So this is the Volcano Canyon thrust. Here's the Forest Hill thrust. So that's the New Melones. This is the Mad Canyon, which is that waterfall I showed you previously. And so we're located in between these fault zones within this highly deformed package of rock, which is part of the Calaveras group, specifically the Blue Canyon Formation. So within the mine, those rocks manifest as turbidites, these metaconglomerates up to the left. Mudstones, here's a pristine kind of a gray-blue mudstone. As you get towards the surface, they get oxidized. Intermediate between the metaconglomerate and the silty mud and the mudstones are these silty mudstones, which are a lot more compact, solid rock. They don't fracture as well. And then cutting the whole deposit are igneous dikes. These igneous dikes came in pre-mineralization, so all the quartz veins associated with the gold cut through them. However, these dikes and all of the rocks have been pervasively altered. They all contain porphyblasts of anchorite, carbonate, anhedral. As you get close to the gold-bearing veins, the rocks have been overprinted by a second carbonate event, which has created a euhedral zone of calcite on top of those anchorites. The dikes, interestingly, we have no idea what they are. They don't know if they were aplites or if they were lampropheres. They're completely texturally destroyed, completely replaced. We have no idea what they initially were. In the mine itself, we are trying to find these veins. They're shallow dip veins, quartz veins. They're pretty thin. In the good areas, they're average about 2 inches thick. I've seen them personally a little over 4 inches thick. They are continuous across the levels until they hit the conglomerate. We locally call it the stretch pebble. So you're going to see SP show up on a bunch of maps. That's the stretch pebble. That's this conglomerate. And when it hits the stretch pebble, the veins just pinch out. Throughout the mudstones, which is our best rock, that's our favorite rock to find the gold, metamorphic mudstones, the veins will often pinch and they'll step. We call it lensing or feathering. These are just kind of colloquial terms for that the miners have developed, and we've adapted some of them. And they'll have offset. Sometimes it's only a couple inches. It can be up to 6 feet of offset. So as you're mining along, especially you can imagine if you're mining down dip on the vein, and all of a sudden that vein drops down 4 or 6 feet, you've got to try to figure out where that vein is and find it and decide, do you want to ramp down to keep going, or do as what the previous owners have done often and walk away from it because it's too difficult. There are a lot of quartz veins in the deposit. We're looking for those low angle ones, but there are quartz veins of every orientation you can imagine associated with I'd say at least 4 different mineralizing events. Only one of them carried the gold, host the gold, but there are quartz veins all over the place. These are just a couple images of kind of one of those areas where the propagation tips are overlapping and the quartz veins are stepping. You can see a whole slew of veins in between them. Here's some really steep veins that have intersect these low angle veins, and you can see a low angle vein cuts right through them, indicating that they are later in the history of the deposit. It's not too uncommon that we find these type of veins. You can notice the scale, these are not small veins. I interpret these veins to be metamorphic in origin because you can see the tips of them have rotated and indicating that they were being emplaced as the deformation of the deposit was going on. Before it was a deposit, deformation of the package of rocks. And these veins are cut by the low angle veins as well. These veins never contain anything of real interest yet. However, in the area, there's a number of quartz crystal deposits, and I think most of them come out of these type of veins, really nice glassy quartz crystals. Eagle's Nest has not produced any quartz crystals that I'm aware of from these veins. This is a picture of a face, just to kind of give you guys some idea of how complex it can be while you're in there. So the picture on the left is unannotated face. On the right, I've annotated all the quartz veins in red. So this bottom one here, that's the floor quartz vein, we call them, because we keep them on the floor. That's the productive vein. That's where all the gold is. In this particular heading, this whole area here was where we mined the gold out of. Outside of that, there was no gold. Above it, you can see these shallow dipping veins as well, but they're oblique to the main vein. There's another set above that at a slightly different orientation with then a vertical vein cutting off to the left. So it can be quite complicated. But there is order to the seeming chaotic nature of these veins. This is a model view of the deposit. So up in the left is a plan view looking down at some of our workings. You can see that black line, that's the profile line that you see below here. And so we're looking down to the southeast. In red, like the previous image, are all the mapped veins. So I hand mapped all of these veins over a period of time as we mined into the deposit. This area over here to the far left, this is that metamorphic package of veins I showed you previously, just to give you kind of context. So when I first arrived there, they were mining along this low angle vein here. We stopped there because it was realized that they were on the wrong vein. The vein we actually wanted was the lower vein. So then we backed up and ramped down, which is filled in to get down to this lower vein. It was a really neat geologic exercise though, because we had this upper and lower vein separated by about 12 feet. And you can see all of these other subhorizontal veins that go in between those two veins. Those sometimes carry little specks of quartz, and sometimes enough that we get confused, we get concerned, we don't want to destroy gold. So we have to blast differently when we start to find them, and then we question, is this going to be one of those lensing events, or is the main vein still at the bottom? So there are moments where we have all sorts of long discussions and mine very slowly to not make a mistake. The last thing we want to do is blow up very nice gold specimens. You can also see along here that there are vertical veins that show up over and over again throughout the whole deposit. So this is what it looks like at the mine after we've collected a face. You can see here those mudstones, those philitic slates. The quartz vein that we got the gold out of runs all along the floor. And so we cleaned out all the gold in this area, all the quartz in this area to make sure that we did not miss any gold because there were significant amounts of gold here. So the history of the mine itself. Well, the claims were initially staked in 1907. From what I understand, they were following the plasters. Like Terry pointed out, it all starts with a plaster deposit. So they were coming up the American River, and then they would chase the gold up the hills as who knows why, maybe the concentrations, maybe the crystal shapes. Eagle's Nest has been known forever to be a crystal gold mine. And so people probably saw the crystals in the canyon, and maybe they stopped and they figured out exactly where it was. Who knows? But they staked the claim in 1907. They used a really interesting method that became clear when I did a bunch of photogrammetry using drones. And they would gather the water up on top of the hill, and they would create a canal system. So I counted, I think, probably about 35 or so stacked canals from the top of the hill down, where they'd bring the water down and then they would run it down particular areas that were fluffed up to erode it to try and find the quartz veins. And so it's interesting that dump 5, the dump I showed you, is a large scale version of that. And so by us creating this dump, we're actually doing a massive reclamation project, which really keeps the Forest Service happy. Anyhow, they claimed in 1907, they added, it was claimed by 2 families, the De Marias and the Greenwoods. And they controlled the deposit. They added 6 additional claims through the 1940s. And then those 2 families worked those deposits all the way up until 1986. Along the way, they would pass it successively. It went through a couple name changes as different family members came in. The Socoras were the last people to really commercially work it. They came in on the Greenwood side. They married in. In 1986, the De Marias leased the claims to the Socoras. And then the Socoras worked them in earnest from 1986 until sometime in the early 2000s. And so the vast majority of the specimen gold that any of you collectors have came from the Socoras. Before that, before the Socoras, they saved some crystals from here and there, but most of it was just melted and milled. In sometime in the early 2000s, the Socoras were mining on their 4th generation of the Greenwood family, and the Dick Socora, who sold it to Daniel, his kids were just tired of it. They spent their whole life mining. They didn't want to mine anymore. They were running into all sorts of legal issues with the state of California, and they decided to be done with it and sell it. That's when Daniel sent me down to the mine in 2017, and I spent a month at the mine surveying the whole mine and mapping it, just to give Daniel an evaluation as to what I thought was the potential future of the mine. 2018, Daniel secured the sale and bought it. They quickly added 5 additional claims surrounding the claim block just to protect us. And since 2022, we've been actively mining the deposit for Eagle's Nest mining. So one of my roles at the mine, I'm the geologist, but working for a tiny little company, I wear all sorts of hats, everything from sourcing to HR to permitting to surveying, geology. I do all the surveying. I came in 2017 with a LiDAR system attached to a Leica MS-60, which is a super high precision device. I use Trimble survey grade GPSs outside in the canyon to get locations, and then I could walk this machine in through the mine. The thing was slow, 1,000 points per second, but it had immense precision, plus or minus 2 millimeters. So I spent a month surveying, which created a base model to work from. We then switched over to a GeoSlam LiDAR, which is pictured up in the upper right, which is just this little handheld, looks like a Ghostbuster thing. It's pretty neat. That thing does 300,000 points per second. Way too many in reality. Whenever I import those surveys, I have to get rid of 90+% of the data initially because it's just too dense. There's no need for it. But it's fast, which is great. And then I tie all those surveys into that original work I did to keep everything geospatially in the right place. So here's just a view to see how it works. This is an image in the mine. This is a point cloud of that same image. You can see some of the fracture surfaces. Then I triangulate that point cloud and I bring it into another software called MinePlan, which is the repository for all the geologic data. So all the exploration data that we're going to do, all the mapping data, any ground support, everything is kept in this MinePlan software. So I'm going to show you a whole slew of images now of that MinePlan software to familiarize you with the extent of workings at the Eagle's Nest. This is a cross-section view of the mine, and the mine has a large amount of levels, as you can tell. The system is stacked. So the gold structures are vertical structures, where those vertical structures intersect the horizontal, subhorizontal quartz veins. That's where the gold was precipitated. And the major structures, you can trace them from level to level to level. For instance, there's one they called the main, because it was the main structure. That main structure shows up on every single level except for junior's level. They did not reach the main. So it's really interesting because if you find a new area, which we are hopefully going to do, we have not yet, if you find a new area of unexplored structures, we call these gold-bearing structures contacts. Why? That's what the Socorros called them. They had no geological training. The name just kind of stuck. So you'll see the word contact in capital C. That's why. We call them contacts. And so if we can find an area of new contacts, there's a good probability that it's going to be stacked above and below it to some depth and height. So that would be a very exciting day. The levels are named based on their position relative to Mosquito Ridge Road. So you can see here, let's get this thing to work. Where is it? There it is. So that flat spot there, that's Mosquito Ridge Road. Okay, so at that one you have 0 level, which is juniors. Junior is Junior Di Maria. He was the last Di Maria to work the deposit before he sold his portion. So small workings, as you'll see in the next slide. Below that is the -100. That was the first level that the old timers really found good gold. So if you guys ever go to Auburn, right outside of the mine, there's a courthouse there with a whole bunch of gold from Eagle's Nest on display. That all came out of the -100 level. The -200 level sits directly below that. That's the main level that Socorros started on. So that level was all mined by wheelbarrow, almost exclusively, pickaxe and wheelbarrow by the Socorros. The Socorros did a number of drill holes, 3 of them, as the 200 started to be exhausted in their eyes, and they discovered that the veins keep on going below them. So they mined another side added in. They call it the slusher into the 300 level. Once they hit gold, they hit a lot of gold. They realized they needed to change what they were doing. So at that point, they built a road down. They built this new portal, which is the main portal, which is kind of on the 350 level. And they started mining that 300 level. Once they exhausted the 300 level, they went down. As they were going down, they hit an intermediate vein. They call it the 350. That vein is only a ½ inch to an inch thick. They mined it for a bit, did not have much gold, so they abandoned that level. They went down to the 400 level. They mined the 400 level for a while, but they were not very impressed with the grades. Apparently there was a mysterious wind that was blowing through the mine and removing the gold. So they thought the gold level sucked. So they drilled, they figured out there's a 500 level vein. They went down to the 500 level vein. The grades down there were great, but the conditions were very difficult. Very deep, long hauls, lots of water. They worked it for a while, and then at some point they got involved with some legal things. They had geologists come in and map the whole mine for the first time and evaluate it. He wrote a report, Robert Cook, I'm sure some of you are aware of Robert Cook. He wrote a report for them in 2004. And in that report, he identified some areas on all the levels that they could still work. And they decided that it was more advantageous for them to go back up to the 200 and start working again on the 200 on some low-hanging fruit, easier to access. That is where they left off. So just to kind of give you an idea, this is juniors levels. These yellow lines here, those are the contacts. So those are structures that carry gold. So you can see the 0 level potentially has a lot of potential. They barely touched it. It's right along the side of the road. Here's the 100 level. You can see that SP showing up there. That's that conglomerate, stretched pebble, because the pebbles in the conglomerate have been elongated and stretched out. That is the gold blocker. And you'll see that in all these images that they mine up to it and then stop. The veins will go into it, both the vertical structures and the horizontal, but then they dissipate very quickly. The gold dissipates in a matter of feet where it's just, there's no more gold in existence in it. Below the -100 is the 200. This is the current level that we're working on. Everything to the southwest of that thicker area, that was all mined by wheelbarrows by the Socorro back in the day. They made tunnels just big enough for the handles to fit through. The boys said they went to school with bloody knuckles on a regular basis, those kids. The area off to the northeast, that's wider, that is the area that they came back in with machines, with mucker machines, mechanized machines, and started mining gold again on the 200. And this room up here, this large area with all these contacts running through it, this thing is a little bit tricky to use. That's where they left off. So when we came into the mine, that's where we wanted to start. It was not easy to get to, as you'll see later. You can see the SP. It's a little more detailed now than it actually was. This is what it looked like in 2017. I didn't know what the stretch pebble exactly looked like, but I didn't save the original data. So that's the updated version of what the stretch pebble actually looks like. But you can see it stops us. Down below them, 300, this is one of their main levels. Large amounts of specimens came out of here. A larger amount of specimens that graced your collections likely came out of this level. You can see the stretch pebble down on the bottom where they stopped it every which way. Up in the top, you can see that they tried to get out of it. The Socoras, they mined an exploration drift up here, trying to get out of it, but they didn't have enough information to know the orientation of it, and they just stayed in it and never left it and gave up. So we don't know how big it is there. One thing of note here is this A49 fault. We believe this to be a post-mineralizing fault, so it came in after the gold came in. On this level, the Socoras mined up to it, but this area over here is very much affected by the surface. So you get all the rocks are oxidized, they crumble, they fall, it's really dangerous. So they didn't even try to really go through the fault up there. Here's at 350 level, tiny. It follows the same pattern. If you kind of click back and forth, you can see that the 350 level, they mined off this part over there. So if you drop in there, you can see it kind of follows a very similar pattern, following all the same structures. They quickly went down to the 400, or the mysterious wind level. Here, they mined through the A49. They pushed through about 30 feet. They made a left. They mined 60 feet or so is what they told me. Just trying to see if they could find something. They couldn't, so they backfilled it. We've never drilled it. No one's ever drilled it. We don't know what's over there. Hopefully, we'll be able to explore it one of these days. This level, you can see off to the east, these structures out here on the 300 level, those were major producing structures. They never went after them on the 400 because the scorers walked away because they thought the grades were horrible. They never went after those structures. So we have plans to eventually go back down there. 500 level, this is the only map that they have of the 500 level. They mined it a bit after they made this map. To what extent, we don't know. It's underwater. It's been underwater since we bought the mine, since I went there in 2017. I've never been able to survey it. One of these days, we talk about buying a pump and getting it pumped out. One of these days, we surely will and find out what the potential is. An interesting note is that I've gone out on the surface during the dry season and walked the canyon, and I've found those subhorizontal veins down to the negative 1200. So there is a potential, huge potential for future production at Eagle's Nest if those veins carry. We don't know at this point. This is a large scale view of the mine in 3D. Those red discs are just schematic representation of the quartz veins. All these levels were mined along the quartz veins. So you can see how the veins are not exactly parallel to each other. They are at oblique angles. They're spaced about 100 feet apart. And connecting all those levels is schematically shown are the gold contacts. So those vertical structures that go from level to level to level. Each one of those, where it intersects that quartz vein, is where the gold was deposited. In between the levels, they've run assays on the host rock along those structures. There's no gold in it. So you can't even use that as a geochemical indicator while doing exploration. So currently, 2018 is when Daniel purchased the mine. He put a mine manager there in 2019. That mine manager's initial job was to redo all the utilities, get the mine back up into an operating position because it had sat idle for many years. And we needed to get good with the government. This is a list of the majority of the government agencies that we have to work with on a quarterly, sub-annually to annual basis to stay good with the mine. It is an insane amount of legal work. We began mining the deposit in 2022 to a limited extent. It was very slow going. I started full time. I got off Pedernera in April. I spent much time in Africa, and then I came to California in August of 2022 full time. Took me about a month to get everything scheduled, to get me legal with the government to go underground and be on site. You need to have all the right certifications. My first day of work on the mine was September 6th of 2022. That night, the mosquito fire broke out. Within 24 hours, the entire mine site burned. The fire burned for the next 2 weeks, burned 76,000 acres. Once the fire was extinguished miraculously by a freak rainstorm that dumped about 2 inches of rain in the middle of the fire, put it out. It took about 2 weeks before they let us back on site. It took us 2 months to get the generator, get the machines back up, tie everything back in, get mining again. Since January 2023, we've been blasting regularly. Depends on how much gold is in there, but every 1 to 4 weeks is about how often we detonate the large full-scale face rounds. And currently we have about eight employees. We're running the mine on a full-time basis. So September 2022, the mosquito fire broke out, 76,000 acres. The upper is the mine. Those are the mine dumps there. Those are the mine roads. This guy over here is the dump 5 as it looked in 2022. It looks a little different now. And that part of the canyon all burned. So underneath all those trees burned, you can see where there's certain concentrated areas where it burned everything. The other side of the canyon you can see is red in the map. That's this stuff here. It charred. It burned off all the organics just down to inorganic material on the floor. That stuff is still black. This stuff is coming back. So a lot of the oak trees didn't die. They're shooting out little buds. The wildflowers came back in profusion. It's really been pretty interesting. So when Eagle's Nest took over, we first started over here where the Socoras left off. We wanted to get to that gold room, but we decided this was the most logical way. Each one of these little colored areas represents an individual round that we took along the way. Once we got into that gold room, somewhere about here is where I convinced them that they were on the wrong vein. We dropped back down, we came in to connect into here, and we opened up this room. That's a big purple area because we dropped the whole back to make space for our machines and loading and things of that nature. From there, we set 2 tunnels out following gold structures. So when we blast, this is what a typical face round looks like. So we drill out this pattern. This red line here is the approximate level of the gold vein. We shoot the lifters along the floor about 18 inches above the vein at the orientation of the vein. This is the burn. That's where the blast initiates. Once that blast goes off, it leaves an 18-inch area of rock that we call the cap rock on top of the vein. So we use machines to muck out all the overburdening. We put that out in the dumps. Then we clean everything off, including the cap rock, and expose the vein where we left it off. From there, it's hand mining, removing all that cap rock so that we can expose the vein and leave the gold specimens intact. This is what it looks like after we shoot. Big old mess to clean up for sure. So first thing we do is we go in there and we wash everything off. We check all the areas to look for unstable rock. We go in with scaling bars and we clean everything out. We use very little ground support in the mine. The rock is extremely hard and competent to recrystallize mudstones, aka ceramic. So a lot of the rock is super, super hard, very competent rock. We were very lucky. However, some days we're not as lucky, namely about 4 to 6 weeks after the rain starts. So the rainy season is about 3 to 4 months. But once the rains start, they percolate down those vertical structures. You guys remember all those gold structures are vertical. They all intersect the surface. All the water percolates in them. And let's see if I can get this thing to play. And for months and months, you need an umbrella really. We just dodge. Surveying, it's a nightmare. You gotta get out of the raindrops. We do all of our face drilling with that jumbo that you saw in the beginning. It's a single boom jumbo. Our drifts are 10 feet by 10 feet. So any pictures of the face, if there's no scale, just think they're 10 feet wide, 10 feet high. Oops. So this is a picture of the face in the middle of collecting it. So here's the host floor. This is the mudstones where we pull the vein back. This is our collecting front. Here's that cap rock, and there's the face. You can see some of the paint marks on here. It's because we have a sampling program of trying to understand how far out from those vertical structures was the gold precipitated, how much quartz do we actually need to handle and deal with. So as we follow that quartz vein, and it depends what it exactly looks like depending on how much gold is in the ground, what kind of targets we have, and how broken up that quartz vein is. There are places where you can just take the hose and wash it, and the quartz is powder and just washes away. There are other places where I question my sanity, where I'm sitting there with hammers and chisels trying to hammer out these insanely hard quartz veins. Here's a view of a fairly complicated area. This round took us 28 days to collect out the entire quartz vein. There are a whole slew, as you'll see here in the future, of gold-bearing structures that ran through here, contacts. And on top of it, the quartz vein feather, 6 different levels. As this thing spun around that conglomerate, each one of those feathers had gold in it. So we had to carefully go through one by one, figuring out which vein the target is in. It was not an easy task. At the end of every round, we clean everything down. We pull all the muck back and expose the floor the best we can. Wash it all down. I go in and survey it. They give me 2 to 3 hours to go in and map it all and record all the geologic features that are currently exposed in the round. So Daniel, most of you probably know Fine Minerals International. He is a specimen guy. He likes crystals like all of us. So this is a specimen mine. That's why he bought it. That is our main objective. That's what we mine it for. However, there are not only specimens there. There's gold. Now there's no CM gold. All the gold is visible. We've done tests to prove that. You can detect the gold with a pinpointer metal detector. If the metal detector says that this piece of quartz has no gold in it, it's because there's no gold in it. We've run many, many tests to try and see. But that gold can be down to 0.5 millimeter, all the way up to, there are pieces, I personally have seen pieces of 0.5 meter. Historically, they've gotten even bigger, single pieces of gold that come out of there. We don't have a definitive cutoff. There's a lot of different types of gold at the mine. There's beautiful octahedrons to 5, 6, 7 centimeters. And that's the most desirable kind of stuff that we want, right? But there's a lot of gold, especially along the contacts of the vein and the host rock, that's a much finer, I call it snow gold. There's not really a name for it. It's just really fine grained crystalline gold. The best stuff typically comes out of the center of the veins, the center line. So the quartz crystallized from the top and the bottom. That center line is where all the best crystals occur. But often, along the edges, that gold is not desirable, little tiny bits and pieces. So what do? Well, we gather it all up, of course. We keep track of it. You can see here more pictures. The green is where the gold is. The pink is the samples that I collected on both sides of that structure. We then process them individually to try and understand if they have gold or if they don't have gold. And what we found is that the gold stops. Once you go this way, there's no gold. Once you go on the other side of that green that way, there's no gold in the vein, which makes our lives a little bit easier. The gold that's not of specimen quality, we melt it. Because our mining operations, it's instant money. And so we pour it into, we fire it at about 2,000 degrees in a flux, pulls all the impurities, any pyrite that's in there, any silica, and then we pour out these gold bars. The gold is about 87% pure. It's about 13% silver with a very small amount of a whole list of trace elements. Fortunately, no arsenic. So far, every assay report comes back 0. This last batch of bars we just sent off actually had a little bit of platinum in it for the first time that they paid us a few $100s for. Never seen platinum before. All right, here's the good stuff now. Collecting gold. So when we had to hit our first strike in February, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, we convinced the bosses with a flurry of videos and pictures, and they hopped on a plane to come out. And so here's Daniel Chinchillo and his partner Marissa with our mine manager. And when we take the cap rock off, we always try before the cap rock, but the cap rock is 18 inches thick. It's kind of hard to get good signals through it with the detector. But whenever we pull that cap rock off, the first thing we do is we put the metal detector on it to see if there's gold in there. Once we identify the gold, we start to wash it. Now, if the rock is super hard, the quartz vein hasn't been shattered, what we'll typically do is we ensure that there's no gold sticking out of the quartz. So we wash it off really good and look for little gold sticking out. If it is, we protect it. If it's not, we just keep cleaning off the cap to get as much of that quartz vein exposed so that we can delineate the specimen sizes so that we can figure out how much we need to remove. Sometimes it's hard. For instance, recently we pulled out a piece of quartz that was 3 feet wide because using detectors we couldn't find a break. There was just gold throughout the entire piece of quartz, so we pulled out the entire piece of quartz to send to the lab. Other times the rock is very fractured. You just put water on it, you pluck out the quartz pieces, you wash it off, and because of that high reflectivity of the gold, it just shines. So you just see it sitting there. At that point, we pull out voltmeters, we look for conductivity. So we try to see how big are these pieces of gold so that we can then define how big of an area of quartz we need to remove. If we're going to remove the quartz, there are places where the quartz is just too shattered and there's no point in trying to get the quartz out because it's just pulverized. Those, we just wash it carefully and try and get the pieces of gold out whole. If they're still stuck in quartz, we want them in the quartz. Those are the best specimens, right? So we define the limits of it, and then we use hammers, chisels, screwdrivers, diamond saws to remove the quartz around the limits of the gold specimen and extract these quartz cakes, I call them, slabs of quartz with the gold inside. When the gold is really fractured, often we just pull out gold specimens. You can wash these things off and put them in your cabinets. This is how they come right out of the ground, all of these, every single one of them. It's exciting and fun. Not ideal for the boss. He preferred they were still stuck. But it makes our lives a lot easier at the mine because you get the gold out quick. There's no question of if we're going to break it, how you're going to get it out, how much work we have to put in there. Other times it's more difficult. Here's one. You can see the host rock of the mudstones up there, and there's a little pocket. So a lot of people want to know pockets. Is this stuff forming in pockets? They call them pocket mines, pocket gold mines. Mark Twain talked about these things. He's got stories. They don't call them pocket mines because they're crystal cavity pockets like us field collectors are used to. They call them pockets because you get these large concentrations of gold that are more or less barren outside of them. Now we know as gold miners, you guys don't know, that's not exactly true. They're not really isolated. There's order in all these geologic systems. They're connected by those structures, those contacts. But there are places where the gold concentrates in massive amounts. And for instance, we followed one pocket where we had specimen after specimen over a zone about 2 feet wide. That zone pinched down and then got about 10 inches wide and kept on going, no more specimens. Gold, lots of gold, but no specimens. Just little tiny pieces of gold infiltrating all the quartz. All the specimens were located in one area. That's the pocket. However, these veins do have pockets in them. In the center line, there are often little vugs of euhedral crystals. Unfortunately, they're always shattered. Always. Never get out clusters of quartz crystals. Always broken quartz crystals cemented together with gold crystals all running through them. They don't come out together, unfortunately. Very rarely. There's a couple of times where you have one little point stuck in the quartz or something like that. So there are pockets in the quartz. The gold pockets are not individual cavities of gold. Where those little pockets exist are where you have the best gold crystals. That's where they show their best form. So you can see here's a little pocket, beautifully crystallized gold. We got it out with the quartz vein, sent it off to the lab. I haven't seen it since. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what happened to it. Here's a good example, 3 examples to show you guys the different types of material that we are faced with every day at the mine. Best case scenario, worst case because it's the most difficult for us, best case because for Daniel it gives him the most freedom in the lab to decide what is the specimen going to look like. All the gold is encapsulated in quartz. You can't see in this picture like here's a little bit of gold, here's a little bit of gold sticking out. There's gold all in there. We don't know how good it is, we don't know how big it is, we don't know how connected it is, but we can't destroy it because we know there's gold in there, so we pull it out whole, we wrap it up and we send it to the lab. Other times we get it out and you can see there's gold sticking out all over on that thing. That piece is about this big. All gold in the center, solid quartz in there. Those aren't too bad because they come out pretty easily, which is nice. These don't come out easily. Those are challenging. These are nice because they come out easy. They're good because they got a bunch of quartz on them so he can turn them into really nice specimens. The most exciting, but the worst case scenario for Daniel is they just come out, all the gold is exposed. We always hope there's going to be a little bit of quartz somewhere to have a base on there. If it is, we glue it, we preserve it, we do everything we can to keep it together. Other times you're just washing and the gold just rolls right out in your hand. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a floater. So we mined the deposit. We started mining it in 2022. January 2023, we started shooting round after round after round. We hit a little bit of gold. Then we got into the conglomerate again. We're mining nothing, nothing, nothing. We got into that big room. We opened it all up. Very little gold, opening it up. We started mining the 2 drifts in. One of them had a bunch of gold, but nothing really good. We got one good specimen at the very end in the far corner of the last round before we were about to intercept the old workings. We found gold along the way, so we're excited, but in hindsight, looking back, nothing good, except for that one piece. The other tunnel that we mined 4 rounds, weren't really finding anything. And then we started finding gold. And this here is one of the first pieces that came out of that first area that we found gold. So this is fully prepped in Daniel's lab in New Jersey. They sent us a video just to show it. Nice, classic eagle's nest, good form. This piece came from the next really good pocket that we call the Valentine's Day pocket. And this one actually has a little baby quartz crystal in the rock still. So this came out of a huge slab of rock about this big, and they were able to trim it out and prep it the exact way they wanted to. They used x-rays to look at the gold that's hidden inside the quartz to determine what is the best way to remove the quartz and present the specimen. So you can see a lot of this stuff is the really fast dendritic type growth, the Spinel twins. And then what's kind of interesting and common is you get these little platelets, hexagonal platelets, which are flattened Spinel twins of octahedron, or you get nice little octahedron, well-formed big crystals that grew along the edges of these dendrites. Maybe, as Terry was pointing out, maybe the system started off really fast when it got triggered, and then it kind of equilibrated a little bit and slowed down and grew in a more stable environment and got some of these well-formed crystals that just drape. I know John's little specimen out there is the same kind of thing where you get these nice perfect crystals along the periphery of a kind of chaotic interior of a specimen. And here's a nice James Elliott, I think it was James Elliott, took a photo of that same specimen you saw in the video, something you would see in the magazines. So here's the 200 level again. That's where we're currently working. That's where we've been mining since 2023. And as we came into here, let's see, where is this thing? I don't know where it is. There it is. Saw it. There it is. So as we came in along here, we got to here, and we passed through that dike where the pointer's sitting, and we hit our first real pocket. We called that pocket the Valentine's Day pocket because we found it literally on Valentine's Day. That's the pocket that got Daniel and Marissa really excited. They flew out to participate in it with us on the 3rd day, so they missed most of the fun. Daniel, my boss, is giving a talk, as Julian started to allude to, in 2 weeks in Socorro. Registration is still open if you guys want to go. Closes next week. He's giving a talk on the Valentine's Day pocket and the King of Kashmir, that amazing aquamarine specimen that he facilitated the extraction of in Pakistan. His talk is going to be full of eye candy from Valentine's Day. And I apologize to you guys, he's going to have better pictures than me. Valentine's Day was February 14th. They just finished processing Valentine's Day last week. It takes an immense amount of time. He's got all the good pictures. I've seen a highlight of some of the things they're showing. They're absolutely amazing. Go see his talk if you want. I fortunately became a father on April 17th, and I went out on paternity leave. And we named my son River. And while I was on paternity leave, well, he's born 50.8 centimeters, 20 inches. And while I was out on paternity leave, they hit a piece of gold that is 20 inches long, 3 inches wide, a river of gold. So in honor of my son, they named it the River Pocket. Yeah. And so that river pocket, this is the Valentine's Day pocket. So you can see here's all the big specimens. They stopped there, no specimens. When we got to here, that's where we hit the river pocket. And the river pocket produced a large amount of beautiful specimens. These are up to 10 centimeters. These are 2 to 6 centimeters. This big one on the right is almost a foot long, 25 centimeters. So these are all straight out of the ground because unfortunately nothing was processed, nothing has gone through the lab yet. I have no idea. One of the most phenomenal specimens that came out is the bonsai tree. And it's two-sided, so there's all gold all through here in the floor of it. There's all gold here, and there's a tree trunk of spinel twins that wrap up that make the trunk of this thing. I actually think it's probably upside down. I think that top is the roots and the bottom is the canopy. We mined that in April, then we kept on mining forward, then we backed up because we needed to find better gold. We started mining on the river again, and just 2 weeks ago, we're back into the river. We shot it again this week, and we're still getting absolutely amazing crystals coming out of the river. So these are all the references that I used to do all the research, mostly on the Motherlode. And I thank you, and river is growing, but the gold specimen is still the same.
Didn't have the heart to cut that talk short. Oh my God. Wow, those are spectacular, and I can't wait to see them in person in Tucson, too.
Yeah, Daniel's planning on putting on a display in Tucson, exactly what it will look like, only he knows and he probably doesn't know yet, but he's told me numerous times he plans on putting on a display at the main show.